there's an awful lot of people who are going to college, and we think it's great for women that there's so many of the people going to college. It is then kind of interesting to think about, I think, what some of the barriers are that women might be facing as they go through that process. Like, so we need the grants, or we need the support for them.
Yeah, and it's a question that I think perplexes people. Like, people think that there's so many women on campus, you know, they're like, we're like locusts, you know, like it's like this plague of women who are swarming around the campuses. And I say, you know, the number of women on campus has not translated into women in leadership positions, whether it's in business, in academia, you know, so it's not as though these women have now come and taken over society. And it's also that women are still not pursuing non-traditional educational degrees or careers that have kept them behind in wages, you know, and so there's a way in which you can say that they're women, we don't need to make any special effort for women because look, they're already there. But we're also looking at issues of, you know, who are the people who are teaching our young women? You know, what has happened on our campuses in terms of leadership? Are women becoming professors? You know, are they getting tenure? You know, how many women are on Capitol Hill? So, you know, education is not sort of the end all for women making progress. And so as long as we see that the numbers are high, but the results, for example, in science and technology and moving into the workplace, are not keeping pace with the number of women who are on campuses.
And that's something that interests me as a historian, because what we learn from the history is that access isn't everything. I think for the longest time, the history of women in higher education was written as a story of access. Get in the door, open the door, as I said, even with the moral land-grant colleges and having male colleges open to women. So the story felt like access, but just as Gloria says, simply getting in the door doesn't mean that you're going to have equality of opportunity. Right. Everything's not going to turn out the same. Even worse, what I've noticed, this is a little bit more muted in the last couple of years, but several years ago, we had a backlash, I think, against women in colleges because the number was really so much larger for women than for men. Women became the majority of all college students right around 1980, 1981. So since that time, I would start to hear, is there a boy crisis or a men crisis in higher education? And as a historian, that really began to ring some bells for me because interestingly enough, the very same argument happened right around 1920 around the high schools. So one of the things that you notice when you study the historical trends is that it's obvious, I think, to everyone that education tends to rise. What used to be the be-all and end-all of a high school diploma, now it's more undergrad, and soon it will be graduate level. So the high schools that we know today, we're very used to high schools having a college prep track and a general track and a vocational track and really a little bit of everything. But that's unusual. That didn't really start until about 1910, 1920. It's what we call the comprehensive high school. So before that, high school was the unusual opportunity that a college was, you know, many years later. So as high schools began to be more popular, women began to find their way into high school. Women saw high school as the best way for them to get the kind of training into the new field of clerical work, into sales work. So girls started to go to high school, and you heard the same concern, a boy problem. It was called the boy problem. And it was a concern that if women were there, they were taking something away from the men. And I think that was the same concern we see in higher ed, when actually the whole of our enterprise is expanding. Women may be larger in number, but first of all, that doesn't mean men are being shut out. And secondly, as Gloria indicated, it doesn't mean that the same success rate happens universally.